Well, welcome to episode 7 of the Gospel Works podcast, where we discuss how the gospel applies to work and life. We're your hosts. I'm Aaron Giesler from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and this is my good friend, Josh M. And today, you're in for a real treat, folks. We are joined by our special guest, Keith Philippi. Glad to have you, Keith.
Well, thank you.
So, give us a little bit about your work. You're retired now, but what did you do for work?
Well, my primary job was owning my own business for many years. It was a precious metals recycling company, basically, where we refined silver and gold for various industries and then made products for other industries out of that metal. So
Nice.
That's great. You married? Where are you from? Kids, grandkids, all that. We got to get all this.
yeah, that's fine.
The people want to know.
Okay, I'm single, divorced, actually.
Available?
Ready to mingle?
Yeah. Probably beyond available.
Beyond mingling. All right.
I just turned 76, so I'm an old guy. I have 3 children, 2 of which are twins, a boy and a girl twin, and my oldest son, which I essentially stole from my ex as a part of.
It was an amicable stealing.
Yeah.
How many grandkids you have?
I have 4 locally and 1 that was just born in San Francisco, who we will be seeing next week at Thanksgiving.
Oh, man.
For the first time. So.
Well, tell us something about yourself that people may not know.
I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in St. Louis, or just south of St. Louis, in a Civil War barracks called Jefferson Barracks. And I was an avid sailor and actually won the Missouri Governor's Cup one year in a sailboat race, in a regatta. So
Wow.
And then you moved to Albuquerque.
And now I live in the desert.
Yeah, it's all beach, no ocean. So
That's right.
It's beach for miles.
So
Keith, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
Well, I'm a little of both. I think professionally I've always been an extrovert.
Right.
Personally, I've always been an introvert. I live alone. I've been single for a long time.
Right.
And seem to be well adapted to that, I think. So.
Nice.
So you owned a precious metals refinement company.
Right.
And so not everybody. That's not
not
doctor, lawyer, teacher.
Right.
Tell us a little more about that.
Okay. When I moved to Albuquerque, I got a job with a company that was a small jeweler supply company, which meant that they provided everything that jewelers could use: tools,
right.
equipment, metals, everything, diamonds, stones, all that stuff. That company, I spun off a business from that company, but this was in the 70s, and during the 70s there was a huge boom of Native American jewelry, and so this company provided all the sterling silver for the Native American jewelry boom, and it was a lot of metal.
Right.
And what happens is that we'd sell the metal, they would make their jewelry out of it and bring us back the scrap, and we'd buy the scrap from them. Well, we'd get 55-gallon barrels of this scrap and ship it back to the manufacturer who we bought the silver from originally, and they would refine it and pay us something for it.
Turn it back into something used, like
right,
because wire and
right,
all that
exactly.
stuff, bars and
right. And that's actually what got me into my business. Is there was that industry, which is called the precious metals refining industry, were mostly very old companies, and the material that we sent them, or that we bought from them, and then sent them to scrap that we sent back, was 92.5% silver.
Right.
And when they got it back, it was an industry standard to just deduct a significant amount, and they'd credit us at like 83% or 81%. So there was a natural dishonesty in the industry, which was generally recognized by most of their customers. So I thought, well, I'll start a business where we don't do that.
You didn't throw any lead bricks in there, okay, just to make it 80%.
Right.
That's
Right.
So I mean, basically, they were they were a scrapyard for precious metals.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we set up the technology to refine precious metals, and we started recycling
Right.
our own precious metals, and then we went soliciting around the country. And of course, basically, to get more into the background of this whole thing is that what made me interested in that is that, I mean, this is the early 70s. We had just gotten over Lyndon Johnson,
Right.
Richard Nixon, the war in Vietnam, and a bunch of other stuff that made integrity and truth a major issue. And I was a young guy at the time. I was 20 years old or so, 22 or something like that, and made integrity important to us and truth important to us. So this was a way of implementing that
It
commitment.
seems like a lot of businesses are born out of
Well,
see a problem, solve a problem.
well, and it was a competitive edge.
Right.
Oh yeah, because you're going to give them 10%.
Yeah, we're going to
Just
give
for
them,
doing
we're going to give
just for being honest. Yeah.
significantly more
Right.
return. So I saw it as a competitive edge in entering what was an old and established business. So
How much pushback did you get from the old guard?
they never even acknowledged us, and
Okay.
it was
Were you kind of a blip at first on their
yeah, we were. The irony is, over the next 10 or 15 years, progressively they all went out of that business.
Oh.
Right.
One of the businesses that is interesting that you can sort of see in literature is if you saw the movie Goldfinger, the business in that was a company called Engelhard Metals, which was one of those old school refiners.
Right.
So, and Goldfinger was one of the principals.
So how long did you do that business?
Almost 40 years. It started out with 2 or 3 people and grew very rapidly. I think at the end I had 140 employees, and in this country and 40 in China. And our last 10 years, our annual revenues were $200 million. So
Right.
it turned into a pretty good business.
Yeah, I would say so. Well, a lot of people want to be the boss,
Right.
But they have no idea what the boss actually does. What did your daily, weekly, what was kind of your rhythms and your primary responsibilities as the boss?
Well, I guess the primary role of the boss, of course, is to manage the operations. But that quickly gets delegated, in my experience,
Yeah.
down the chain.
Where it should.
Yeah, yeah. That gets delegated down the chain to, division managers, and we had like 5 divisions, and people ran those divisions, and I managed those people. But primarily, you evolve from running operations at some point into the visionary and plotting the future, financing the future, figuring out where the company is going to go and grow. Companies require growth, typically. The old saying, if you ain't busy being born, you're busy dying. That's definitely true of businesses. And
because you guys, just from talking to you, there's two things that really stick out, which you said, you said you reinvented the company a couple of times.
Oh, several times. Every 3 years. I figured we needed to be in new businesses every 3 years.
And what did that look like? What were some of those new ventures, new businesses? I mean, it was all still precious metals refinement.
Right.
Was the industry.
Right. Well, one of the transitions was one of the things that we innovated on early in the organization. Probably one of our first major innovations was we started doing recycling X-ray film. People don't realize it, but all the black on an X-ray film is silver, and the same is true of photographic film. It also contains a lot of silver. So when it's processed, some is left on the film and some goes into the chemistry. So one of the first things we did was set up a technology. The current technology at that point was environmentally unacceptable. It was a cyanide-based technology. So we found an enzyme that removed this silver from the plastic coating, and it was a biodegradable enzyme made out of cow's milk, actually. So we washed this film in this enzyme, and we extracted the black silver-bearing portion from that. So it was environmentally friendly. So we started recycling X-ray film, and that went on until digital came along and took X-ray film out of the game.
Then you said you started doing cameras as well, disposable. Tell that story, would you?
Yeah, we followed that up with, back in those days, and a lot of people won't really remember this, but all photography was done with film. And you either went to your local drugstore or to a Fox Photo or to some chain that developed the film for you, and then you paid them and got your pictures. Well, in that process, there's a waste stream that's created. And in about 76, the EPA came along and said, hey, wait, what are you guys putting down the drain? And, of course, what they were putting down the drain were toxic materials, including silver. So we came up with a technology for recycling, for recapturing the silver before it went down the drain. And ironically, it was a very, very simplistic. We made canisters, out of plastic pipe, and stuffed them with steel wool. And it turns out that iron reacts with the silver in the solution and precipitates the silver out, and iron goes into solution. And iron is not toxic, so it was an environmentally effective solution. And
I remember you telling me one time you walked into a Walgreens or a Walmart or something, and you saw all those disposable cameras were big for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
I mean, they were at whenever I got married in January of 2000, and before everybody that I knew that got married bought, a gross of disposable cameras that they would put at the table. They would give one to every guest, and you would just leave them on the table, and they would develop them all. And you saw the guy at the place, just going through and having those disposable cameras, and y'all started recycling those too, right?
Oh, yeah. And you have to remember that back in those days, Kodak was a huge company, and it's almost completely disappeared now. But Kodak Park was acres and acres and miles in a major industrial. And that's all they did was make silver film and use tons of silver. So we had a lot of business based on the photo industry for a long time.
I remember something else you told me is whenever you said, I used to work for somebody and I had one job. I had one boss.
Right.
And then I owned a company, and then I had 140 bosses.
Right.
Explain that, would you?
Well, let me put it this way. My personal philosophy, and this does reflect my Christian faith, actually, but my personal philosophy in business was always that, and I told many young people this in the industry or in business and competitors and whatever, that from my point of view, and we owned a lot of assets. We had rolling mills and big furnaces and a fancy high-tech lab, and we ended up with a lot of hard assets, as they call them. But my understanding, and I think most good businessmen know this is true, but the greatest asset is your people. And if you don't recognize that, you're going to miss the boat. And a lot of business are built on exploiting people, but that's a big mistake, I would say.
Yeah.
So
we agree.
yeah.
Right.
Also, really goes against what Jesus said.
In the short term and the long term, it doesn't work out very well.
Well, that's right.
What were some name a couple of things that you just like you look back on your work life and just were the most awesome things about your job?
Well, this was both awesome and scary, but early on in my career, when, I don't know, business was probably 20 or 25 people at that point and growing rapidly, I started realizing that the people I was hiring were doing things like having children, getting married,
Oh, man.
buying houses.
Right.
And I thought, holy gosh, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
Because if I screw up,
Yeah, because they were doing that based on your success.
everybody's hanging this on their job. And I'm
Right.
thinking, if I mess this up, I'm not just messing myself up. There's a chain of command here that follows. Lots of damage is going to be done. So, from that side of it, it was a little intimidating to look at, how on the other side of it, it was great to see people building their lives and having success. And, I watched ultimately a lot of my employees that were with me for 20 and 30 years. And so I saw their kids and grandkids come
Right.
along and them go through. Some of them went to work for us even. So,
Wow.
it's always, it was neat to see the impact you have on people as a company owner.
What's the biggest challenge you ever faced?
Well, the biggest challenge was the end of film, I guess.
Right.
When digital came along, we knew that one of our major supplies was going to disappear. But I'd sort of, that had been predicted for 10 years prior to it happening.
Gotcha.
So we were responding to it, and our response was we simply went from, there were other sources of refining material, but we shifted from a recycling company to a products company. And we focused on making products for various.
Explain that.
Okay, a refining company takes, like I said, recycles metal. You take in dirty metal and make it clean and make it usable again. And a products company makes something that is then consumed by some other company. And in the silver industry, ironically, I guess the biggest consumer of silver is the glass industry. All the automotive glass and all of architectural glass has a silver coating on it.
What for?
The reason it has a coating on it is because silver is the most reflective metal of all the elements. Has higher reflectivity, and so what it does, that thin coating of silver reflects energy, and so to reduce energy cooling cost or heating cost, the energy is either reflected back into a building or reflected outside of the car so you don't have to cool it, or vice versa. It reflected back into the car so that you don't obviously have to heat or cool it. So silver that's a big user of silver. But there's also all brazing, all soldering, all kinds of welding.
Electronics.
All kinds of electronics. CDs used to be silver-based, they're now aluminum-based, but when they first came out, they were all silver. That shiny coating was silver.
Yeah.
So there's lots of coatings. All mirrors quality mirrors are silver.
Okay. So y'all didn't go into the glass making business, did you?
No, those were huge, major corporate investments. Libby owns Ford and Guardian Glass, and I mean these are
So you became a supplier, a vendor for these big glass companies.
right. What they used was big slabs of silver. When they make glass, it's 8 feet wide, and it's on a continuous um, casting. It's being cast out of 8 feet wide and I don't know, maybe half an inch thick or something. And what the way it's coated is they have huge slabs of silver in a vacuum, and they hit that with a lot of energy, direct current, and that causes the molecules of silver to jump off into the vacuum and coat onto the glass. Obviously, you can't see it.
Yeah.
It's such a fine coating you won't see it, but it still has its reflective qualities. So
you would make big, like how big was a slab of silver y'all made?
a standard, the slab is called a target in that industry, and a standard silver target would be 8 feet, 72 inches wide by maybe 14 inches across in the other dimension and half-inch thick. So it's like a big old chunk and it would weigh a bunch.
And at the price of silver, that's pretty expensive. It's a pretty expensive coating material.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it never gets fully consumed as it's coated onto the glass. The silver erodes into a pattern that's called a racetrack on this big chunk of silver. And when it gets to a certain point, it becomes inefficient, so they ship it back to us, and we refabricate it into a proper target.
So that was scary to go in. I mean, y'all ended up doing well, but that was scary to totally change everything.
Right. Go into a complete product business. The other area that was really attractive for us was that all the computer chips are gold coated. They're layers of silicon and coatings of gold and other things. And the targets that make computer chips are usually about 16 inches in diameter, maybe a quarter inch thick, and of high purity gold. And that was our real claim to.
That is also an expensive.
Right.
Yeah.
Our claim to fame was that we were very good at making high purity metal.
So 3 nines, 4 nines?
No, it'd be 4 nines or 5 nines.
Wow. 99.9999. Yeah, that's
3 nines is the standard
for jewelry
commercial grade
Okay.
for trading. For jewelry, it's normally sterling, which is only 92.5% the balanced copper.
Oh, okay.
But in gold, for high purity gold, we actually bought the second plasma spectrophotometer made in this country and used it, and it could analyze to parts per million and parts per billion contaminants.
Wow.
And for 32 different metals simultaneously.
Oh, wow.
So we could
Wow.
quality control our purity very closely.
Yeah, it probably would have given you a heart attack to see the $4,000 an ounce price back when you guys were doing that.
Yeah, when I was starting in the business, believe it or not, back in the early 70s, silver was less than $40 an ounce. When I was starting in the business, it was probably $300 an ounce. And the highest price I ever saw in silver when I was still in the business was the Hunt brothers in the 80s tried to corner the silver market, and the market got up to $50 an ounce. And that's about where it is now, I think.
Wow.
So when I think about making that kind of a major shift, I think a lot of people, they see the boss sitting behind the desk or walking around with a coffee cup,
Feet up on the table.
and they're like, what is this guy doing? So maybe just tell us in brief, what is making a pivot like that take from as the boss? Like what is the plan? I mean, obviously the operations gets delegated down, but coming up with the idea, arranging the financing, arranging all the relationships what does that look like?
Okay. There again, it comes back to the people.
Right.
If you have the confidence to rely on your people, then these changes are shared.
Okay.
You don't just turn the ship, say, okay, everybody,
Right.
here we go. You integrate that whole decision-making and development process throughout the organization so that you're talking to all the people that have a share, basically,
Right.
in the future of the company, and get their input. And, some of them have things to contribute. Some of them have, talents that can take you in the right direction.
Right.
And, some of them just need to know. So
it's a lot of talking, huh? And
so
listening.
there's a lot of we tried to have a high level of communication, and both formally in terms of directors meetings and those sorts of things where you formally sit down in a meeting room and on a regular basis and go through reporting and discussion of problems and issues and that sort of thing. And there's the thing that was so popular, which I think most good bosses come by naturally, is management by walking around. I had 3 locations virtually in the same neighborhood. They were in a mile or a mile and a half of each facility. And,
Except for the China one.
What's that?
Except for the China location.
Right, except for the China location, which was
more than a mile.
But, I made a point of, talking to the employees on a regular basis.
Right.
To be out at least once a week at each of those locations and checking in with people.
I know one thing that you said was important to you is handing out paychecks and stuff like that.
Yeah, I personally, for my entire career, I personally gave out, if I was in town, every paycheck.
Well, that's where you build a lot of that credibility, because these are big, risky changes,
Right.
and I know that I've kind of been in some of those same situations, and people, they look to the boss in a lot of ways as a security blanket of kinds, right?
Right.
So you've got this big pivot that you've got to make, and maybe it takes a year or two to do it, and you have to keep kind of walking along with it.
There's no certainty. There's
That's
no,
right.
It's not guaranteed. There's no guarantees with it.
Well, and there's, to be honest, there's no certainty in any business.
Absolutely.
Right, sure.
But people want it.
That's right. And consistency is probably more important than certainty.
Yeah.
Explain that a little bit.
Well, I think if people know that that they're dealing with a reasonable set of values and that they're being told the truth on a regular basis, that they're not, that there's not a lot of internal conflict in the organization.
Right.
I think that gives them a strong sense of security. And particularly, like I said, we had people there for 30 years. When people come into an organization where there's people that have been there for 10 or 12 or 15 years, that gives them a very strong sense of comfort in terms of the longevity and their personal security.
Yeah.
I know. We see it here even in the church business world. Things are cyclical in church, and whenever somebody goes, "Oh my gosh, this is happening financially, or this is happening with attendance, or this is happening in some church business cycle," if somebody's been around for 10 or 15 or 20 years, they go, yeah, this happens.
Right. Been there, done that.
Been there, done that.
Got the T-shirt.
This is just part of it. So,
right.
So Keith, one of the reasons we had you on here is Josh and I, we believe deeply that our faith in Jesus is the most important commitment in our life, and we wanted to find people that also believe that. We're trying to follow Jesus and to be transformed by the Spirit, and we are certain that God is working in this world through our work, even though that work doesn't always feel meaningful. It's not always successful. When it just can feel bad. So, how did your faith affect the way you did your work? And you do, because we're going to talk about what you do now in just a little bit.
Okay, well, let me give you kind of a long story, if that's okay.
Long story long, I like it.
Basically, I was raised in the Catholic Church, and I have always believed in Jesus Christ and knew who he was. Unfortunately, from my point of view, the Catholic Church didn't focus a lot on the Bible, but there was a lot. I had 12 years of Catholic education, so I was not unfamiliar with faith. Um, However, when the Catholic Church changed in about 1970, 69 or 70, we had the ecumenical movement.
Right.
And the first part of that was really cool because the priests and the brothers were becoming very open and innovative and so forth. But then it got kind of strange because things that people like me had grown up as traditions went away.
Like what?
Well, the one that I always mention, and that is that I was all my life I knew that if I ate meat on Friday, I would go to hell. And
I mean, don't we all?
and after 1969 or 70, all of a sudden I could have prime rib and not worry about it. And I was at that point 20 years old and a hippie running around the country, and so it kind of rattled my faith. So there was something of a hiatus in my active faith for 6 or 7 years there.
Right.
Maybe less than that, but for quite a while where I just said, I don't really buy the Catholic Church routine.
Gonna let them figure this out.
Yeah, well, and there was a lot of history in the church that in all religions that is pretty ugly.
Yes.
And you kind of prefer to sweep under the. So I was kind of without faith or diminished in faith. And a lot of my friends went through what we called the Jesus freak movement, and I didn't buy in with them at that point. So I didn't really return to my faith until about I forget, at any rate, I went through a divorce, a very ugly divorce, and had 2 4-year-old children, twins, and an older son who was about 7 at the time that was from my ex's first marriage. And I found out that there had been no faithfulness in the marriage ever. And my wife at the time wanted a divorce. So my world fell apart, and that drove me back to looking at faith. And the irony of that situation was that at that point, in this business that I was still operating, it turned out that I think it was 5 out of 7 of the division directors were active Christians. And my headquarters building had a beautiful, big, modern meeting room. And they had come to me and asked if they could do Bible study in this meeting room. So,
do you even remember telling them yes, they could?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I absolutely told them in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Because I was in the throes of finding my faith again.
Oh, gotcha.
But I was looking at a more personal relationship with Christ, not a religion. So, and a little backstory there. My father was raised Catholic, and he was Catholic, and my mother was Lutheran, and she was Lutheran. So I ended up. She was an active Lutheran, and so I ended up occasionally in a Lutheran Sunday school, but most of the time I was in a Catholic school. So I got a little bit of both worlds of religion.
Yeah.
And I decided I saw the problems with religion, but I realized the necessity of faith.
Yeah.
And I still believed in Jesus. I never really stopped believing in Jesus because he was always historically, in my mind, this superior being. So with that that kind of renaissance in your faith, that finding it, how did your faith affect your career? Well, it obviously gave me an appreciation for the people I was working with.
Yeah.
But also, I had family members that were, they were members of this church at that point. So,
Yeah.
so they were opened up to me and brought me into this church and gave me a church home to deal with. And but in terms of business, I have to say there, at that point there really wasn't a lot of change in policy or attitude, because I was raised with those.
Yeah, you had. I mean, it seems like you had the values instilled in you, and you believed in the values,
Right.
even if you didn't value the traditions.
Right.
And so when you started your company, the way that you ran your company, even before then, even before you kind of went out searching again, you were still operating by those values.
Right. And I mean, the way you treat people has always been well established in my history. I mean, that my parents always made that a primary. I have 4 brothers and sisters, so you learn to get along with other people, and you also learn to value other people so much. So
so maybe if we come at it from a different direction, like, do you think that following Jesus made you better at your job, or maybe a different way, like if you were looking to hire someone, and especially in a leadership position, would you be thinking, there's some benefits to hiring people who believe in Jesus?
Well, the whole basis of our business was integrity.
Right.
I mean, to give an honest assay and to pay an honest return for what we received.
Yeah, I mean, what you said when you started it, it's people were already doing a 15% haircut.
Right.
That was the standard industry lie.
Right.
And you said, no, our business is going to be about integrity. That already sets you apart.
That was our competitive edge.
Right.
And nobody bought it. I mean, you couldn't sell it over the phone or with advertising, but the only way you were going to get it was, and this is what we did. Our whole sales pitch was, give us one try, ship us one shipment, and compare it to your historical returns.
Right.
And that's all it typically took.
Well, in the scriptures, we often see that following Jesus has a cost to it. Are there situations or times where doing the ethical thing or attempting to follow Jesus in your business made stuff harder, at least in the short run, or provided additional challenges?
Well, I don't think I'm the only person that sees the country and the world as being somewhat anti-Christian and certainly anti-faith-based. I mean, to profess Christian business policies would be, I think, ridiculed in this world. And but the truth of the matter is, I think I had the opportunity, because of the nature of the business, to meet some very high-level executives in large organizations. Okay. Right. And what struck me universally was the high level of integrity of those people. And,
things have changed maybe a little bit.
Well,
I mean, not all the time, but I mean, for sure.
No, but I mean, it was surprising to me because, the standard story in the media and, in the culture is that, business is ruthless and
people do well by messing people over.
Right. You cut through, it's a cutthroat. Rising up in corporate America is cutthroat. And that is not what I found at all in the higher echelons of management, is these people were highly ethical.
Wow.
And very sensitive to individuals, And
so that's cool to hear. I know some of my experience in relating to folks that were higher up was.
I'm not suggesting these guys were all saints.
Sure. No, I'm not saying. But I'm saying, like. Well, and to be fair, I worked internationally with a lot of folks that grew up with a different value system. But it is encouraging to hear that you were able to interact with a lot of folks that you could respect.
That's right.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You know,
So, yeah, is there anything being of high integrity, faith-based that hurt you or your business?
I can't really say that. I think that, there's obviously there's always awkward times when your company makes a mistake and you have to fess up to it, right? And you have to go to somebody and say, hey, we really screwed up your account.
If you're ethical, you have to fess up to it.
Well, that's right. And so,
Maybe that cost you a little bit.
but those are short-term pains, I mean,
Yeah, it was such a long-term gain, right? Because in the end, people, when you confess to a mistake, that speaks to your character.
yeah, but it also doesn't necessarily keep the business.
It doesn't necessarily keep the business. No, yeah.
It also challenges your, the perception of your competency.
Right, sure.
So, that's part of the game, and you either do it or you don't, So there were those little times, but I don't think there's any. I was never asked or suggested that I had to do something that I considered terribly unethical.
That's incredible.
That's also very nice.
I have a good friend that works in Albuquerque that said, "Yeah, I'm as high as I go because I won't lie or steal from my boss."
Right.
And that's just so it's not every day that happens. And so, but now, so in 2000, what year did you sell your business? 2009.
Yeah, 2009.
2009, sold your business.
Right.
You said, you know what, just gonna play golf and watch TV. No, that's not
No.
that. You transitioned into retirement because so this podcast we've been making the claim that work is not just a job you get remunerated for,
Right.
but work is anything that's not worship or leisure. And so, tell us about the work you do, unpaid,
Right.
in retirement.
Well, again, I'll give you some background. The first corporate charity that back in 1976, that we started supporting, started making money.
Mm-hmm.
God forbid.
You got to start giving some of it away, or else they hammer you.
So we felt like we wanted to contribute to the society, and the first place we donated to was the New Mexico Boys and Girls Ranch. And the reason we chose them is because they took neither federal or state money to do their program.
Wow.
And we thought their program was pretty sound. At the time, I think they had about 40 kids. They were old. They'd been around since 1944. And they started right out of World War II. There were tons of children that didn't have proper parenting. So
yeah, I mean, some of their dads came back
or didn't come
shell
back.
shocked, or they didn't come back.
And they started with about 70 some kids, and these days they were in the 40s, I think, the kids that they take care of. And so I chose them as my corporate, and I got to know the CEO and the director, and over time, and every year we'd donate to them. And then we added other charities over time as we made more money and had more resources to deal with. But so after all these years of donating to them, when I was retiring, the CEO came to me and said, "Hey, I'd like you to come down and look at the ranch and see if there's something you'd like to do down there." And so I went down and looked, and I said, "Well, the ranch is 2,000 acres, and the campus itself is 25 acres, so it doesn't take up a lot of that. But the ranch has farming, and they have 4-H activities. And the perception is that the kids work on the ranch. Well, that's not true. They're not allowed to. The state CYFD won't allow the kids to do any kind of real work. So they don't work on the ranch. So I got to looking at it, and I'll tell you a funny story. 10 years before I sold my business, I always wanted to own a ranch. And so I tell my kids now that, look, I always wanted to own a ranch, and now I have all the headaches of owning a ranch and all the work that goes in and worries that goes with owning a ranch, and I never had to pay for it.
You got it for free.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So I got all the grief for free. But yeah.
But that wasn't your initial plan to go and help at the ranch.
No.
What was your initial plan?
I was going to buy a ranch.
I thought you were going to go to Africa for a while.
Well, I had been to Africa, and I wanted to go back. And in fact, that would have been a place where I might have bought a ranch.
Okay.
Namibia looked pretty attractive, and I knew some people that had ranched in. There's a few stable countries in Africa,
mm-hmm.
which you can speak to, that are just very comfortable, and just the difference and the availability of the plenitude of need in those countries is obvious.
Right.
And I thought, given the resources that I ended up with, if I'm going to spend them, let's spend them where they're going to do some good. And, Africa was one of those places. Yeah. So the other alternative was, just a small ranch in the States, because I wanted to,
You wanted to do good with it.
Yeah, but I also had been dealing with 100 bunch of people for a long time, and I wanted a little more quiet.
You wanted less bosses?
Yeah, I wanted fewer bosses.
Yeah. So what do you do? Explain kind of what you do at the ranch.
Well, initially we took on, we managed we grow a certain amount of hay for the stock. We have cattle, and we have horses, and we have sheep, and all the 4-H stuff.
The kids do the 4-H, and they actually take care of the animals.
They actually do take care of the animals.
Those animals.
Right. So, but it requires feeding them. So we've got probably 250 acres in hay fields that we manage, and I've bought a bunch of equipment that they didn't have, so that we have tractors and all that construction stuff, and and then for 14 months after I got there, there was 300 acres at the south end of the ranch that was absolutely covered in what's called a salt cedar, and it's a nasty plant, and it's non-native, and it kills everything around it, and puts salt in the soil. And so we did U.S. Fish and Wildlife proposed to us a project of removing them. And so we spent 14 months pulling them out of the ground. These things were so thick that they couldn't survey them. You couldn't run a survey through them because the trees were so thick. So we did that, and they came up with a project to put in some wildlife features. So we put in some ponds. We planted some, they're kind of like feedlots. It's areas that, like we have a millet pond that feeds ducks and geese and stuff, waterfowl. Just make general improvements on the property.
So we're making a butterfly.
Yeah, we had a butterfly field. There was a whole deal about the monarch butterflies that supposedly migrate through here. And we worked with, again, U.S. Fish and Wildlife on that one. So we converted, it's probably 80 acres or so to this alleged butterfly field, and they came in and planted it with the special pollinator flowers that never came to nothing. And we've watered it.
Tax dollars at work, sir.
Everything else.
So you went from being the boss of 150 or 190 employees to a ranch hand.
Right, basically.
Yeah.
And I work with 2 or 3 other guys, one of which is a volunteer and 2 of which are paid.
Yeah.
And I pay them. The ranch doesn't pay them. And we take care of, we basically are land managers.
Yeah.
We take
steward of the land.
Yeah.
So how has your faith in Jesus influence the work that you do down at the ranch?
Well, it was driven by that. Basically, I was sitting on a bunch of money, and I thought, well, I want to give this much to my kids. So I said, there's a certain amount I have sort of set aside that'll go to my kids, but I didn't really want to overwhelm them with, and they're all success. My three kids are all now very successful. I just found out my oldest son is in June will become the CEO of his company. He's just been promoted to CEO. And
he's about to get a lot more bosses.
Yeah, he sure is. And I made provision for them, and that's really all it doesn't cost me a lot to live. Of course, at my age, lots of things are paid for. I don't really use a ton of money. I don't need a lot to live on. So.
Well, you're pretty busy working.
Right.
Tell everybody about how because some people think, oh, in retirement, I'm going to volunteer an hour or two a week. I'm going to.
Actually, we leave town at 7:15 or so. We get to the ranch a little bit after 8, and we come home about 3 in the afternoon and get home about 3:30 or 4.
1 day a week?
5 days a week.
5 days a week.
That's my kind of retirement.
Yeah.
Just a tight 40.
Right.
Just a tight 40 in retirement. Now, what are you most proud of that you've done at the ranch?
I guess the wetland restorations, and we see the waterfowl come through every year, and they've become. We've struggled with Middle Rio Grande Conservancy, and we've had some battles over using water for non-agricultural reasons. They don't like that, but I think the appraised value of the property that we were dealing with was about $11 million when we started, and it's like $17 million now. So that's the underpinning financial basis for the ranches. They get everything else they get in donations. So we've improved their assets significantly, and that's kind of mercenary, but actually just watching God's miracles happen. I mean, I told my buddies down there that the first time we planted a hayfield, there was you take literally millions and millions of these tiny little seeds and spread them over 30 acres, and then a week later you go back and look, and all of a sudden there's millions and millions and millions of little live things. Life has just been created, and you see God's hand in all this stuff.
Yeah.
So
what is 76-year-old Keith? What would he say to 26-year-old or 36-year-old Keith? What do you wish you would have known?
Actually, I'm pretty happy. I didn't get very altruistic. I was a scrambler at 26 years old. I was out to make a buck, and I was out to make a business, build a business, and all of those things. And that wasn't wrong. There's a time to all seasons, and that is what you should, if you're 26 years old,
you should be ambitious.
You should be working to make a family, to make a living, to make whatever it is your goal is.
A career, a life,
Life, education, whatever. You should be scrambling. That's what. But
God gave you the energy for that.
Yeah, I mean that's what you were born to. So.
What's the value or principle that you're trying to pass on to your grandkids? Like, what do you want them to know as they kind of come into the world, start their career, start their adult life?
I did actually. I had to speak at a engagement party for my son and his wife, and my speech really was about two things, and the fundamental thing was that I watched as my children grew up, that this particular son grew up, and I watched him develop empathy, and I think that to me was the most important and most satisfying thing, as I saw him as an infant and all the way through his life, examples of when he put somebody else first and took into account other people's feelings and needs. And And I thought, if you get that lesson, you're pretty much home. I mean, you can
Right.
go a lot of miles on that lesson.
Well, Keith, I know that you have been, you are one of probably 5 guys in my life that has been most impactful. I was trying to remember when you and I and Don started meeting, and I want to say it was like 2011.
Sounds right.
No,
Might be right.
it was
2012.
before that.
Maybe it was right after you retired. Maybe it was in
was
like
like
2009 or something.
Because when I came in 2010, you guys were
We-
already having breakfast.
So
Okay.
we have been having breakfast weekly for nigh on 16 years.
Yep.
It's now evolved into something into something where your character and your wisdom and just your ability to do 2 things: to stay focused on the main things, and to see a need and to solve a need, are lessons that I still learn today. That you can stay focused. It's like, okay, here's our industry, here's our goal, whatever, whether it was the precious metals refinement, now it's the ranches, it's investing in young guys, like here's our industry, here's what we do. And here's how we're going to do it. We're going to find needs, find problems and solve problems. And if we can find problems and solve problems, there's never going to be a lack of work. There's never going to be a lack of anything to do.
Never be a lack of purpose.
Never a lack
Right.
of purpose either.
That's really what most people need. It's a purpose.
So I just want to tell you thanks. You've been pivotal in my life, and
It's been really cool to see how you and Don both have invested in Aaron when he was a lowly youth pastor and
just
um,
below the barrel.
Right.
Not even bottom of the barrel.
But we also really appreciate you coming to share your wisdom with the folks who will be listening to this. Now, we'll just say, living out the gospel requires real face-to-face community and relationships with cool people like you. Like the relationship that you and Aaron and I have built over the years couldn't have been done by Zoom. It couldn't have been done by email. You have to be able to see what the other person is like when the unexpected happens. You have to be able to see them in real life. And for those of you who are listening, we hope and pray that you're finding that real community, those real relationships wherever you are.
And if you live in Albuquerque and would like to meet Keith in person, we would love to have you join us here at Grace Church, corner San Antonio and Louisiana. Or if you also want to join us, you're down in the South Valley, you're welcome to join us at Mesa Valley, our campus down there.
Yeah. So thanks again, Keith, for joining us. And thanks to all of our listeners out there. We hope that you'll join us again on our next episode.
So until then, for Josh and Keith, my name is Aaron, and this is the Gospel Works Podcast.